Hello everyone. I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of the AQA GCSE Maths Foundation Tier Paper 2 uh, 2021 paper. So if we go with the first few questions, the multiple choice questions. Question 1, circle the factor of 32. So that's going to be 16 because you just want to know which number goes into 32 as a division. Question 2, y is 3 more than x. Circle the correct equation. That will be y equals x plus 3. Question 3, circle the value of 0.15 as a fraction. That will be 3 over 20, because you just want to know which fraction is equivalent to 15 over 100. Question 4, here is a parallelogram. Circle the expression for the perimeter. So when we draw out the parallelogram, we get something that looks like this. In a parallelogram, the parallel sides are equal in length, so you have two S's and two W's. So when you add all four sides together for the perimeter, you get 2S plus 2W. Question 5, work out the value of a squared minus 4a when a equals 10. So when we substitute a equals 10 in the expression, then a squared would become 100, 4a would become 40, so therefore a squared minus 4a would be 100 minus 40, which is 60. Question 6. 16 people were asked to name their favorite fruit juice. Here are the results. And this question has parts, so 6a. One of the people was picked at random. Work out the probability that their favorite juice was orange or mango. So this is a probability or question, and in these scenarios, we need to add the individual probabilities. So the probability of orange is 4 over 16. The probability of mango would be 5 over 16. And when you add these together, you get 9 over 16. 6b, on the grid, draw a bar chart to represent the results. So it should look something like this. The main things to look out for to get 3 out of 3 for this question. One is you need to make sure that the axes are labeled, and these should reflect the titles in the table that's given in the question. So on the horizontal axis, the title should be, or the label should be favorite juice, and and on the vertical axis, the axis should be labeled as frequency. The next thing is that the vertical axis should start at 0 and go up in equal increments. So starting at 0, I went from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way up to 6. And then obviously for the horizontal axis, each bar also needs to be clearly identifiable. So you could write apple, grapefruit, orange, mango, or you could just do what I did and use the first letter for each. Either will do, as long as it's as long as you can clearly tell which bar is representing which juice. And then once you got all that, then drawing each bar to the correct height would be simple and straightforward. And also just another thing, whether you use spaces or not is optional, but it needs to be kept consistent between the bars. So if you, like in this case, there's equal spaces between the bars, but if you didn't use spaces, then you need to make sure that there are no spaces between the bars. So consistency is the main thing for this. Question 7. 6 cakes cost £10.74. Work out the cost of 11 of these cakes. So the first thing to do is to work out what the cost per cake is, which is £10.74 divided by 6. And then once we know what that cost per cake is, then you can work out the cost of 11 cakes by multiplying by 11. So doing all of that would give you £19.69. Question 8. Here is a cuboid, work out the volume. So this is what the cuboid looks like. The volume will just be the breadth times by the depth times the height, which we're given in the question. So we just need to multiply all of the numbers together, and that would give us 240 cubic centimeters. Question 9. Work out two numbers that are multiples of 9 and have a difference of 54. So the first thing to just appreciate is that 54 is obviously a multiple of 9. And the important number in this case in here is the 6, the number in maroon, obviously. And the reason for that is because when you list the times table, the 9 times table, then to pick two numbers in the 9 times table that answers this question, the difference in the maroon numbers needs to be 6. So I've gone for 1 times 9 and 7 times 9. The difference between 63 and 9 is 54. And the difference between the maroon numbers is 6. You could choose any other two numbers in this times table that answers this question, as long as the difference in the maroon numbers is 6. So for example, you could have gone for 2 times 9 and 8 times 9, because the difference between 8 and 2 is 6, and just like how the difference between 72 and 18 is 54. So the main thing is you can choose any two numbers here, as long as the difference between the maroon numbers is 6. Then any two numbers will do. So I went for 9 and 63. Question 10. Convert 11.2 kilometers into miles. Use 8 kilometers equals 5 miles. So just using that information, 8 kilometers equals 5 miles, we can work out what 1 kilometer is by dividing both sides by 8. So that would be 1 kilometer equals 5/8 of a mile, or 5/8. And then we can work out what 11.2 kilometers would be by multiplying by 5/8, because that's what 1 kilometer is in miles. So doing that calculation would give you 7 miles. Question 11. Annie spends these amounts in 4 shops using £20 notes, £10 notes, and £5 notes. And the information is in the question provided. In each shop, she pays the exact amount and uses the smallest possible number of notes. Work out the total number of each note she uses. So to answer this question, if we focus on the fact that she uses the smallest possible number of notes, that must mean that she uses the highest value note first, as much of that as possible, before moving down the lower value notes. So just to say that again, because she uses the smallest possible number of notes for each note, she must first use as much of the £20 notes as possible before moving down the £10 notes, and then the £5 notes. That way you're going to use the smallest possible number of notes. So if we take shop A, for example, using £20 notes, we can get up to £60 by using 3 £20 notes, and then one £5 note for the remaining £5. For shop B, £40 can be achieved by using 2 £20 notes. For shop C, you can reach £100 by using five £20 notes, and then with the remaining £15 that can be achieved by using one £10 note and £5 note. And then the similar thing for D, you can reach to £60 by having three £20 notes and then one £10 note and one £5 note for the remaining £15. So when we total all of these up, there are in total 13 £20 notes, so 13 £20 notes, two £10 notes, and three £5 notes. Question 12a. A sports team played 40 games, half were home games and half were away games. Each game was a win, a draw, or a loss. Of the home games, 2/5 were losses. Of the away games, 1/10 were wins. Complete the frequency tree. So, first thing we can appreciate is that there were 20 home matches and 20 away matches, because the question says that half of the total games were home matches and the other half were and the other half of the total matches were away games. So half of 40 is 20. Then we can also say that there were 8 losses, because the question says that of the home games, 2/5 were losses, and 2/5 of 20 is 8. And then we can also say that there must also be 5 draws, because we were given that there were 7 wins and 8 losses. So to make the total 20 home matches, there must have been 5 draws. And then if we focus on the away matches, we can say that there were 2 wins, because of the away games, the question says of the away games, 1/10 were wins, and 1/10 of 20 is 2. And then therefore there must have been 6 draws to make the total number of away matches 20. Question 12b, and we've got the diagram from the last question here to help us. Question 12b, the team gets 6 points for a win, 3 points for a draw, 0 points for a loss. Work out the total number of points that the team got. So we can firstly ignore the losses, because they don't contribute to the overall score, because the question says that the team gets 0 points for a loss anyway, so it doesn't contribute to the overall score. They're just going to get 0 points for each loss. So we should just focus on the win and the draws. So looking at the diagram, we can see that there were a total of 9 wins for both the home and away matches, and given that each win is scores 6 points, then the subtotal is 54 points. And then focusing on draws, there were a total of 11 draws for both home and away matches, and given that each draw is 3 points, then that would be 33 points for that. And then the total points will just be just these 2 scores added up, which gives you 87 points in total. Question 13, factorize fully 50x plus 100. So firstly, just looking at the highest common factor of the coefficients, the 50 and the 100, the highest common factor would be 50, so that would be outside of the brackets. And then when you do, and then the terms inside would just be the 50x divided by 50, which would be x, and then 100 divided by 50 would be 2. So the answer is 50 brackets x plus 2. Question 14. Some buttons are red or blue. In the ratio red to blue is 3:5. What fraction of the buttons are red? So if we just focus if we just appreciate the ratio, the red to blue ratio is 3:5. So meaning that for every 3 red buttons there are 5 blue buttons. That also means that because we have 8 buttons here, so for every 8 buttons we have, 3 of them are red. So the ratio, the fraction would be 3 over 8. Question 15, which of these is a correct statement about a cube? It has 12 edges, it has 12 faces, it has 12 planes, it has 12 vertices. So this is going to be, it has 12 edges, because if you count them up, you have 4 at the front, which means there must be 4 at the back, and then if you look at the sides, that's another 4, so when you add them all up, it's 12 edges. Question 16, AB is parallel to CD, FG is a straight line, work out the size of angle X. So if we just draw out the important things from the diagram, which we have here, then the first thing we can appreciate here is that we can draw a Z shape. And in a Z shape, the angles are alternating, or you have alternate angles in a Z shape, and therefore the alternate angles are equal. So the angle next to 48 will be 53 degrees. And then the next thing you have is FG is a straight line, and obviously angles in a straight line add up to 180 degrees. So we have 3 angles here that are on the straight line, which is 53, 48, and X. They must all add up to 180 degrees. So that means that X must be 180 minus 53 minus 48, which is 79 degrees. Question 17. Harry and his sister Jess have some money in the ratio 1 to 4. So Harry to Jess 1 to 4. Harry has £7.35. They pay £16.99 for the present for a friend. Harry uses a third of his money. Jess pays the rest. How much does Jess have left? Okay, so if we just focus on this question, the important pieces. We're given that the ratio of Harry to Jess is 1 to 4 in terms of how much money they both have. So that means that Jess must have 4 times the amount that Harry has, which is £7.35. So £7.35 times 4 is £29.40. And that must mean that Jess needs to pay £14.54, because the cost of the present is £16.99. And we know that Harry uses a third of his money, which is a third of £7.35. So if you do this calculation, £16.99 minus a third or times £7.35 in brackets, then that would give you £14.54, which is as mentioned, the amount that Jess needs to pay. So, and we also worked out how much Jess had in the first place. So the difference between these two numbers would represent the remaining amount that Jess has. So £29.40 minus £14.54, and that would be £14.86, which is the answer to this question. Question 18, solve 10x minus 3 equals 21. So we just need to get x on its own. So we can first do that by adding 3 to both sides, and that would give you 10x equals 24, and then you divide both sides by 10, so x would be 2.4. So question 19, work out which of these fractions is closer in value to 0.5. So obviously this is so because this is a calculated paper, we need to convert both fractions into decimals. So 5 over 16 is 0.3125, and this is 0.1875 below the 0.5 target. And doing the same for 17 over 25, this is 0.68, and again, this is 0.18 above 0.5. So we can clearly see that 17 over 25 is closer in value to 0.5 because the magnitude of deviation is less than that compared to 5 over 16. Question 20a. Point B is 400 meters northeast of point A. Mark point B on the centimeter grid. Use a scale of 1 centimeter represents 100 meters. So obviously I don't have a centimeter grid in front of me, but essentially what you're doing is, because point B is northeast of point A, then it would need to be 45 degrees to the horizontal, so above. Obviously you don't use a protractor for this. The line would just go through the diagonals of each of the squares. And in terms of what the distance is, because it says point B is 400 meters away from point A northeast, then, and the scale is 1 centimeter represents 100 meters, and that means that that means that the straight line, which should be 4 centimeters long, using a ruler. So the black line is enough to answer the question. So AB is 4 centimeters in the diagram, and it's northeast, obviously. So you need to go through the diagonals of the square. That would be 45 degrees. Question 20b. Points C and D are shown on a different centimeter grid. Work out the bearing of D from C. So the bearing is what the angle is relative to the north position of C. And we can see that D is directly beneath C on the grid, on the centimeter grid. So that means that it must be 180 degrees from it must mean that the bearing is 180 degrees because D is directly below C. Question 20c. Work out the actual distance in meters of D from C. Use the scale 1 to 1000. So on the diagram we can see that the distance between C and D, on the diagram the distance between C and D is 3 squares, so 3 centimeters. And then if we apply the scale, that would mean that in real life the distance is 3000 centimeters. But because the question wants us to work out the distance in meters, we need to convert that. So so that would be 30 meters. 30 meters is the answer to this. Question 21. Lynn works as a bus driver. She is paid £10.80 per hour for the first 38 hours she works each week. She is paid 25% more per hour for each extra hour she works. 1 week, Lynn was paid £491.40. In total, how many hours did she work that week? So first, if we work out what her what the basic pay is, that would be £10.80 per hour times by 38 hours, which is £410.40, and that confirms that she worked overtime as well, because this amount is less than £491.40. So if we work out what the hourly rate is for the additional hours she works, that would be 125% times £10.80. Because the question says that she's paid 25% more per hour for each extra hour she works. And doing this calculation, this would mean that she's paid £13.50 per hour for each additional hour she works on top of the 38 hours. So we can generate this equation. We can say that 410.4, which is the £410.40, which we discussed, plus 13.5x equals £491.40. The x represents how many hours she worked on top of the 38, so the overtime hours. another way to phrase it. So we can solve this equation for x by minusing 410.4 on both sides. That would give 13.5x equals 81. And then dividing both sides by 13.5, x would be 6. So that means that she worked 6 extra hours on top of the 38 hours, which is her basic hours, I imagine. So 38 plus 6 is 44. So she worked a total of 44 hours during that week. Question 22. The square root of x is 4. Circle the value of x squared. So the square root of x is 4. That means that x must be 16 because you square both sides. So x would be 4 squared, which is 16. So x is 16. And then to work out the value of x squared, you need to square both sides. So you need to square 16. So x squared would be 16 squared, which is 256. Question 23. Here is a rule for a sequence. After the first two terms, each term is the sum of the previous two terms. The first 5 terms are P, 23, Q, 57, R. Work out the values of P, Q, and R. So we can generate these 3 equations based on the rule. It says that after the first 2 terms, each term is the sum of the previous 2 terms. So that means because Q is the third term, it's the sum of P and 23. We'll call that equation 1. We can say that 57 is 23 plus Q because those are the terms that were before 57, the 2 terms before 57. And then R is going to be Q plus 57, and we'll call that equation 3. So we've labeled those 3 equations as 1, 2, 3. We can substitute equation 1 into equation 2. So we can say that 57 is not just 23 plus Q, it's 23 plus equation 1, so P plus 23, because that's what the value of Q is. The value of Q is P plus 23, so substituting that would give you 57 equals 23 plus P plus 23. And then simplifying that gives us 57 equals 46 plus P. And then solving for P, that would be P equals 11. We can then substitute P equals 11 in the first equation to give us Q, and that would give us Q equals 11 plus 23, which is 34. And then finally we can substitute Q equals 34 in the third equation. That would give us the value of R. So R is 34 plus 57, which is 91. So just to summarize, P equals 11, Q equals 34, R equals 91. Question 24a. Here is a triangle ABC. Assume that angle ACB is 90 degrees. Work out the length of AB. So we have a right angle triangle here. So AC is 15 centimeters. BC is 7 centimeters, and we need to work out AB. So this is Pythagoras' theorem. So AB squared, which is the hypotenuse AB. AB squared is 15 squared plus 7 squared, which is 274. And then we'd square root both sides to find out the length of AB, which is the hypotenuse. That would be the square root of 274, which is 16.55 centimeters. I've gone for 4 significant figures just to be on the safe side. Question 24b. The actual length AB is greater than the answer to part A. So it's greater than 16.55 centimeters, or 16.6 if you choose three significant figures. What does this mean about angle ACB? So it must be more than 90 degrees, because if we go back, if we draw so it must be more than 90 degrees, because we found that when ACB was 90 degrees, then the AB, or the hypotenuse, was 16.55. If the actual length of that is more than 16.55, then the angle must be greater than 90 degrees, as I'm sure you can imagine by what I've drawn here. Question 25. Rearrange G equals 3H minus 1 to make H the subject. So we can sort out the G equals 3H minus 1 by adding 1 to both sides, and that would give you 3H equals G plus 1. Because we need to make H the subject, then H needs to be on its own. So we first added 1 on both sides, and then we need to now we need to divide both sides by 3 to get H on its, to make H the subject, which means that the formula becomes H equals G plus 1 over 3. Question 26. Describe fully the single transformation that maps triangle ABC to triangle ADE. So we can see here that ABC is the larger triangle and ADE is the smaller triangle. So what's happened here is that the larger triangle has been shrunken to a smaller triangle, but we don't say that the triangle has shrunken. Even though it has shrunken, we have to say it's an enlargement, and this will make sense later on, because even though it's technically shrunken, we don't say it's shrunken, we say it's an enlargement, and it'll make sense later on. So first we have to state it's an enlargement. Then we need to say what the scale factor is, which is how many times has it gone larger or smaller. And then we need to say what is the center of enlargements. So if we apply this in this question, we say it's an enlargement by a scale factor of 1/4. And the reason why it's a scale factor of 1/4, because if you look at BC, that is 4 squares, and DE is 1 square. So that means that you've shrunken the triangle by 4 times. But because we can't use the word shrunken in our answer, we have to say it's an enlargement. Then the scale factor would be the reciprocal of 4, which is 1/4. And then the center of enlargement is at A, because A is the common point for both of these triangles. So therefore the answer is enlargement by a scale factor of 1/4 at A. Question 27. A ball contains 5,000 cubic centimeters of air. More air is pumped into the ball at a rate of 160 cubic centimeters per second. The ball is full of air when it becomes a sphere with radius 15 centimeters. Does it take less than 1 minute to fill the ball? And we're given the volume of a sphere so if we just first write down what we're given, because that will help us answer the question. So it says that currently the ball has 5,000 cubic centimeters of air. Then it says that more air is pumped at the ball until it's full. So and when the ball is full, then the sphere has a radius of 15 centimeters, That means that when the ball is full, the volume is 4/3 times pi times 15 cubed, because 15 is the radius of the ball when it's full. And when we do this calculation, we see that the volume of the ball is 4,500 pi cubic centimeters. I'm not gonna, so we don't convert into a decimal just yet. That means that the difference in these volumes represents the amount of extra air that needs to be pumped in to fill the ball to maximum capacity. So we said here that currently the ball has 5,000 cubic centimeters. When it's full, it has 4,500 pi cubic centimeters. Therefore, the difference between the full volume and the current volume is how much extra air you need to pump in. So that difference would be 4,500 pi minus 5,000. And then we also given that the ball is pumped at a rate of 160 cubic centimeters per second. So the time taken to completely fill the ball would be the difference divided by 160. And doing that calculation would give you 57.12 seconds, which is less than 1 minute, which is 60 seconds, obviously. So our conclusion is yes, the statement is true. It does take less than 1 minute to fill the ball, because it takes 57.12 seconds to fill the ball to maximum capacity. Question 28. P is a positive number, N is a negative number. For each statement, tick the correct box. So if we look at P plus N, P is positive, N is negative. So P plus N, and N is saying that P plus N is positive. That is sometimes true. Not always, but it is sometimes true, because it depends on what the magnitude of P and N is. If the magnitude of P is greater than the magnitude of N, then yes, P plus N will be positive, because P plus N is effectively saying magnitude of P minus the magnitude of N, because there's a positive plus a negative. But if for example, if the scenario is the other way around, and the magnitude of P is less than the magnitude of N, then P plus N would be negative. So if we look at P minus N, it's saying that P minus N is positive. That is always true, because again, if we write down what we know, P is positive, N is negative. P minus N would be a positive number minus a negative number. So we have two negatives, so that would be a positive. So it would be the positive number plus the magnitude of the negative number, and that would always result in a positive number anyway. So always true. Then the next one, so P squared plus N squared is positive. So this is always true. The square of so P is positive, and so the square of a positive number is going to be positive. N is negative, so the square of a negative number is going to be positive, because N squared is negative times a negative, which is a positive number, because you're multiplying two negatives. You're multiplying two negative numbers, so that would turn into a positive, and therefore positive plus a positive is going to give you a positive. So always true. P cubed over N cubed is positive, so this is never true. And if we think about it, P is positive, so P cubed will be positive. That's the numerator. But if we look at the denominator, which is N cubed, N is negative, so therefore, because N is negative, N cubed will be negative. And I've wrote in brackets why, because N cubed is a negative number times a negative number times a negative number. We have three negatives, and so when we multiply them, it will result in an overall negative number. So in the numerator, we have a positive number. In the denominator, we have a negative number. A positive divided by a negative gives you a negative. So the last statement is never true. It's never positive. It'll always be negative. So just to summarize, the first statement is sometimes true. The second statement is always true. The third statement is always true. And the fourth statement is never true. 29A. So 250 trains arrived at a station. The number of trains that were late was recorded after every 50 trains. The table shows some information about the results. Complete the relative frequency graph. So we can see that the relative frequency is going to be the total number of trains that are late divided by the total number of trains that are arriving. So for example, when you have a total of 50 trains, the relative frequency would be 16 divided by 50, which is 0.32. And then when there are 100 trains, 21 of them are late. So that would be 21 over 100, which is 0.21. So you need to do that division for all of the remaining ones, and that would give you this. So 0.24, 0.19, and 0.22. So you just do the total number of trains that are late divided by the total number of trains that arrived. And then when we plot these on the graph, so this would just be a plotting exercise, and then once you've plotted them correctly, you then join them up. Obviously I can't draw the graph on here because I don't have graph paper, but essentially the total trains would just be starting at it would start at 0 and then go up in 50s, which I couldn't do here. And then the relative frequency is on the y-axis, but really this is just a plotting exercise, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Question 29b. Write down the best estimate of the probability that a train arriving at the station is late. So because it's saying what's the best estimate of the probability, the best estimate of the probability is when we have lots of data available. So if we look at the table that we had in the in the previous question, we can see that we have lots of data at the last group. So 250 and 55 trains are late. That's when we have most of the data available. So the relative frequency of that is 0.22, or 55 over 250. And you can see that 55 over 250 is the relative frequency, but it's also the calculation you do to work out the probability of a train arriving at the station. So in this case, the answer is 0.22. Because the calculation for relative frequency is the same for the calculation for the probability. Question 30. A, B, and C are 3 points on a circle. The radii from A, B, and C are shown. Is AC a diameter of the circle? You must show your working. Okay, so if AC, which I've highlighted in red, it's not on the diagram, but AC is what I've highlighted in red. If AC is a diameter of the circle, then that would mean that AC is obviously a straight line. That means that if AC is a straight line, then that means that the angles above AC would be equal to the angles beneath it or below. So the angles above it would be the 2 brackets 2x plus 20 plus and the x, and the angle below the AC is 5x plus 40, and these two would be equal if AC was a straight line. So we need to therefore demonstrate that the angle underneath equals angle of the above. So we can rewrite this equation. So the angle underneath is obviously 5x plus 40, and the angles above are, as we said, x plus the 2 brackets 2x plus 20. If we simplify the right hand side, that would give you 4x plus 40 plus the over x. And then when we simplify that further, then the right hand side becomes 5x plus 40, which is identical to the 5x plus 40 on the left hand side. And we already discussed that 5x plus 40 on the left hand side is the angle underneath AC. So because these two sides are equal, we can conclude that AC is the diameter of the circle. Question 31. A straight line has gradient 6 and passes through the point 319. Work out the equation of the line. Give your answer in the form y equals mx plus c. So the equation of a straight line is obviously y equals mx plus c. The question says that the gradient is 6. So we know what the value of m is. M is the gradient, and the question says that the gradient is 6. So we can rewrite the information as y equals 6x plus c. We don't know what the value of c is, but we can work that out because we're given a pair of coordinates that lies on the straight line, which is 319. So we can substitute the x and y values of that coordinate onto y equals 6x plus c to work out the value of c. Doing that, you'd get y, so y equals 19. So 19 equals 6 times 3 in brackets plus c. So what 19 equals 18 plus c, so therefore c is 1. C equals 1. And that's enough. So we have enough information. So the answer is y equals 6x plus 1. The gradient is 6, and the y-intercept is 1 or 0, 1. So the answer is y equals 6x plus 1. That's a walk through the entire paper. Hope that was useful, and yeah.